When I arrived home later than planned, the house was quiet. The sun had long since dropped below the horizon, leaving only a sliver of twilight to cast faint shadows across the suburban street. I had taken my time, possibly more than I should have. Stopping at the corner bakery for a decadent chocolate cake, followed by a bottle of champagne from the liquor store. Tonight was meant to be special. A surprise for Ella, my wife, something that will bring us closer. After weeks of what seemed like an increasing distance, I unlocked the front door and entered our familiar, warm home. However, tonight it felt slightly off. The silence was intended to complete the house and keep it still. Ella had suggested that the kids be Ella's mothers for the night, so she could get some work done without being distracted. I saw no reason to doubt her. She'd been so busy lately, managing the kids, the house, her part-time job, and still finding time for occasional volunteer work at school. But tonight, something caused a small knot of unease in my stomach that I couldn't quite pinpoint. I set the cake and champagne on the kitchen counter. A quick glance around revealed that the living room was dimly lit. The only source of illumination is the soft glow from the lamp by the piano. Ella was very proud of her old grand piano, which had been in her family for generations. She spent hours there playing melodies that seemed to flow through the house like a gentle breeze. The kids enjoyed it as well, particularly Sophie, our youngest, who had recently begun lessons at the local music school. Ella insisted on private lessons, wanting the best for her. I had agreed. Of course, I'd always relied on Ella's judgment when it came to the kids. But as I moved towards the living room, I heard it, a faint sound that was nearly imperceptible at first. Music was a soft, lilting tune performed with skill that I knew was not Ella's. It was more refined and practiced. Then, beneath the music, something else, a low, intimate murmur of voices. My heart began to race, each beat echoing in my ears as I followed the sound, my feet silently moving across the carpeted floor. The living room opened up in front of me, and there they were. Ella and Sophie's young music teacher, a man I'd only met briefly a few weeks before. His name was Mark. Tall, with dark hair, and a boyish charm that I assumed was harmless. He was sitting at the piano, fingers moving gracefully over the keys, Ella draped across the bench beside him. Her body language, her lips curved into a smile I had not seen in months. Ella. My voice was barely audible, but it cut through the air like a knife dot. They both froze. Mark's hands fell from the keys and the music died instantly. Ella's head snapped up, her eyes widening with surprise as she noticed me standing there. The cake and champagne were still in my hands. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence between us is thick and heavy. David. Ella's voice was shaky, and her usual confidence was gone. She tried to sit up, but the movement only drew my attention to her undress. Her blouse was unbuttoned, revealing the delicate lace of her bra, and her skirt was pulled up around her thighs. The realization hit me like a freight train, leaving me speechless and reeling. What's this? My tone was calm to calm, the kind of calm that comes right before the storm. Mark rose to his feet, his face paler. Mr. Hargrove and I. This is not as it appears. I dropped the cake. The box hit the floor with a dull thud. The champagne bottle rolled away, clattering against the hardwood. Is not it? I took a step closer, my hands clenching into fists by my sides. Then, Mark, tell me what I'm looking at. Ella stood up and moved between us, as if to shield him. David, please allow me to explain. I shook my head, the anger boiling over and too hot to contain. Explain. What's there to explain, Ella? I come home to surprise my wife and discover her half naked with another man. What could you say to make things right? Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Not now. Not with this betrayal. So raw and so fresh. It is not. It was not supposed to be like this. It's just happened. I laughed. A bitter, humorless sound has just occurred. How convenient. I looked at Mark, who stood there looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Get out, David. Wait, Ella began, but I interrupted her with a look out. Both of you. Mark did not need to be told twice. He grabbed his coat and practically ran out the door. His footsteps echoed down the corridor as he fled. Ella hesitated, her eyes pleading with me, but I turned away, unable to bear seeing her. The woman I loved and the mother of my children. I couldn't trust the stranger anymore. I quote. "Sorry, David," she whispered, but her apology was hollow and meaningless. I did not respond. Couldn't find the words. Instead, I went to the piano, where the echoes of their duet hung in the air, and slammed the cover shut. The sharp sound echoed through the silence, final and unforgiving. Ella had already left by the time I turned around. The front door closed softly behind her. I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, staring at the spot where she had been, my mind whirling with rage, betrayal, and heartbreak. The house was quiet again, but not in the same way. Empty, devoid of the life that had once inhabited it. I knew then that nothing would ever be the same again. This marked the end of the life I had known and the start of something far darker. The morning after was harsh, as if the world had shifted overnight, leaving me on unfamiliar ground. I had not slept. Instead, I spent the night pacing the house, my thoughts swirling like vultures around the remains of my marriage. The betrayal was an open wound that grew worse with each passing hour. I stand at the kitchen counter, staring at the leftover cake and champagne from the night before. The cake is a smear of chocolate crumbs on the floor from where I dropped it, and the champagne bottle is awkwardly positioned on its side, half empty, forgotten. It's an apt metaphor for what my life has become in the span of a few hours. The sound of my phone ringing startles me out of my reverie. I glance at the screen. Ella's name flashes across it. Her picture, smiling up at me from happier times. I let it ring, watching as the call is routed to voicemail. There's nothing she could say to make things better. Nothing could undo the damage she's caused. But the phone keeps ringing. This time, a different name appeared on the screen. "David, pick up," says the voice on the other end. "It's Roger, my best friend from college. He has never been one for pleasantries, and his voice has a sense of urgency that cuts through my numbness. I pick up the phone and hold it to my ear. "Roger," I managed to say with a hoarse voice. "David, where are you?" His tone is sharp, demanding rather than concerned. "At home," I respond, looking around the kitchen as if to confirm my location. "Where else might I be?" "Good, stay there. I'm coming over," he says, not giving me time to respond before hanging up. I stare at the phone. The silence after his abrupt end to the call is almost comforting in its familiarity. Roger has no idea what happened, at least not yet. But I know that once he gets here, the floodgates will open, and I'll have to tell him everything. 15 minutes later, there is a knock at the door. It is not the usual knock. Roger uses a quick, casual rap when he comes to visit. This one is harder and more insistent. I open the door and find Roger standing there. His face was set in a grim expression. His wife, Julie, appears behind him unexpectedly. Her eyes were wide with concern. "David," Roger says, his voice low and controlled. He steps inside. Julie follows closely behind. What the hell happened? I shut the door behind them, the sound resembling a finality. I'm not prepared to face. I suggest you sit down, gesturing toward the living room. They exchange glances but follow my lead, settling on the couch while I stand, unable to muster the will to sit. Julie leans forward with her hands tightly clasped in her lap. "David, you look terrible. What's happening?" So I tell them, and each word feels like an incision, cutting deeper as I recount the events of the previous night. The way I discovered Ella, the betrayal, the confrontation. By the time I'm done, the room is filled with tension and unspoken emotions. "Jesus Christ," Roger mutters and runs his hand through his hair. He looks at me, his eyes narrowed in anger and disbelief. "I can't believe what she did. Ella, she always seemed to have it together. She was. I say more to myself than to others. At least I assumed she was." Julie reaches out and places her hand on my arm. "David, I'm deeply sorry. I cannot imagine what you are going through right now." Her touches were gentle and comforting, but they only served to remind me of what I had lost. I pull away and cross my arms over my chest. I do not know what to do. I admit that my voice is barely above a whisper. I feel as if my entire life fell apart in one moment. Roger leans back against the sofa. His expression is thoughtful. You need to speak with a lawyer. Start thinking about what happens next. It's not just about you and Ella anymore. It is also important to consider the children. The mention of the children makes my heart race. Sophie, our youngest, still believes in fairy tales and happy endings. Then there's our oldest, who is only now beginning to understand the complexities of his surroundings. How will I explain this to them? How do I shatter their innocence with the truth of what has occurred? I don't want to drag them into this, I explain. My voice remained firm, despite the turmoil within me. They are too young to understand. Julie shook her head. They'll find out eventually. David, it's preferable if you say it in a way they can understand. You cannot keep them safe from this forever. I understand. I admit that her words weigh heavily on my shoulders, but all I need is time to figure out how to do that. Roger stands, walks to the kitchen, and returns with a bottle of whiskey and 3 glasses. He pours a generous amount into each, passing one to Julie and then to me before going on his own to figure it out. He says, raising his glass to ensure that the bastard does not get away with it. I raise my glass, but the toast seems hollow. Empty. I take a sip, the burn of the alcohol doing little to relieve my pain. I'm not sure if I can do this. I confess, gazing at the liquid swirling in the glass. I'm not sure if I have the strength. Do you? Roger says, his voice steady and confident. You're stronger than you realize, David. And you are not alone in this. Julie and we are here for you, whatever you need. Julie nods in agreement. Her eyes were filled with sincerity that caused a lump in my throat. You have always been there for us, David. Now it is our turn to be there for you. The room settles into a quiet lull, with the 3 of us sipping our drinks in a silence that is more comfortable than awkward. I feel a small glimmer of gratitude for them, for their unwavering support and willingness to step into the chaos of my life without reservation. But as the alcohol takes effect and loosens the tight knot in my chest, I can't shake the feeling that this is only the beginning. The start of something far more destructive than I had imagined. My phone vibrates on the coffee table, and I glance at the screen. Ella has sent you a message. Only 2 words. We need to talk. The message hangs there, staring up at me as a warning. I look at Roger, followed by Julie, who is keeping a close eye on me. What is it? Roger inquires, noticing the shift in my expression. Ella? I say, my voice filled with dread. She wants to talk. Julie exhales softly and places her glass on the table. What are you going to do? I do not respond right away, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Finally, I drain the rest of my whiskey and set the glass down with a firm thud. I do not know. I admit, the uncertainty gnawing at me, but I'm going to find out as I reach for my phone. The tension in the room ratchets up another notch. I type out a reply, my fingers trembling slightly. Tomorrow, noon, the park I hit send the message, shooting off into the void with a finality that makes my stomach churn. The die is cast. The wheels set in motion. Whatever comes next, there's no turning back. Julie stands, gathering her things. We should go. Give you some space to think. Roger claps me on the shoulder. Call me if you require anything. And, David, don't make any rash decisions. I nod, but I'm not sure what rash means in this situation. As they leave, the house becomes silent once more, the kind that is deafeningly complete. I am once again alone. The weight of what is to come, pressing down on me like a vice. I walk to the window and look out at the darkened street. The outside world appears to be unaffected. But I know better. My world has been irrevocably changed. The foundation of my life is crumbling under my feet, and tomorrow at noon, I'll have to face Los Angeles. Again. To receive whatever explanation she believes she owes me. To confront the woman who ripped out my heart without hesitation. I'm not sure what she'll say or how I'll respond, but I know one thing for sure. This story is far from over, and the worst is still to come. The next morning dawns gray and overcast, as if the sky is reflecting my inner turmoil. I can't remember sleeping, but I must have because the sun is higher than it was when I last looked out my window. My eyes are gritty, and my head feels as if it has been stuffed with cotton. But the text from Los Angeles looms large in my mind, and the meeting we've scheduled is all I can think about. I go through the motions of getting dressed, pulling on jeans and a sweater, but the process feels robotic and detached. The house is strangely quiet, without the usual clatter of the kids or Ella's soft humming as she goes about her morning ritual. I miss the noise. I realize I'm missing it like a phantom limb. I skip breakfast because my stomach is too upset to consider eating, and instead grab my jacket and keys. The park where we plan to meet is only a short drive away, but every second feels like an eternity. My mind races, imagining every conceivable scenario, each more disastrous than the last. When I arrive at the park, the sky has opened up and a light drizzle falls, soaking the ground, and the few leaves that remain on the trees. The park is nearly deserted, except for a couple of joggers braving the elements. I pull up to the curb, turn off the engine, and grip the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turn white. She's already there, sitting on a bench beneath the canopy of a large oak tree. She looks different than I recall, somewhat smaller, as if the weight of her actions had physically reduced her. She dressed simply in jeans and a raincoat, with her hair pulled back into a messy bun. As I approach, she looks up, and our gazes meet for the first time since that night. David. She speaks softly, barely audible over the rain. She stands, hesitant to approach. Ella. I respond, my voice flat and devoid of the warmth that once characterized her name. We stand there in silence for a moment, the rain falling steadily around us, creating a curtain of white noise that separates us from the rest of the world. Finally, I nodded toward the bench. Let us sit. She follows my lead, and we both sit on the cold, wet wood. I leave a gap between us, which feels both literal and metaphorical. I don't know where to start. Ella begins. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. She does not look at me. Instead, focus on a distant point. Begin with the truth, I say with a firmer voice than I expected. That would be a good location. She flinches at my words and nods. You deserve it. She speaks quietly. David. I never intended for any of this to happen. I never intended for it to happen. I repeat, my anger rising again. Get ready to roll. Ella, you don't sleep with someone by accident. That isn't how it works. I understand. She whispers, tears welling up in her eyes. I know, and I'm deeply sorry. But it was not about him. It never was about Mark. I raise an eyebrow, my skepticism obvious. It certainly looked like it was about him. She shakes her head furiously. No, David, you must believe me. It was not about him. It was about me, about how I felt or didn't feel. I've been really lost lately. Everything was simply slipping away, and I wasn't sure how to stop it. I'm experiencing a surge of anger mixed with something else, something like pity. I hate to admit it. So you turn to him, to a kid who is just out of school. Is that your solution? It was not supposed to be like that. She speaks, her voice breaking. He was just there. He listened. He caused me to feel something again. I haven't felt this in a long time. So what about me? I ask. The hurt has finally broken through the wall of anger. What about us? Did you think about how this would affect our family? Every day, she says, her eyes filled with pain as they finally meet mine. I thought about it every day, and it ripped me apart. But by the time I realized how far I had gotten, it was too late. I was in too deep, and I wasn't sure how to stop. You could have spoken to me, I speak, my voice cracking. You could have come to me, Bella. We could have worked this out together. She looks down at her hands, the rain falling harder, the droplets splashing against the pavement in a consistent rhythm. I was afraid, she admits. I'm afraid you wouldn't understand. I was afraid you would see me as weak and broken. I did not want to burden you with my mess. That's what marriage is. Bella, I say, feeling my frustration rise again. It is dealing with the mess together. It is not about concealing things or fleeing to someone else when things get tough. She nods, tears spilled over and mixed with the rain. I know it now, but it is too late. I have ruined everything. We're sitting in silence again. The reality of our situation is sinking in. I'm not sure what to say. I don't know how to close the gap between us. Part of me wants to reach out to her, hold her, and tell her we'll get through it. But another part of me, the one that has been betrayed, cannot even comprehend the concept of forgiveness. What will happen now? She asks after a long pause. Her voice was small and frightened. I do not know. I honestly don't know if we can recover from this. Ella. She nods as if she expected the answer. What about the kids? What should we tell them? I close my eyes. The thought of our children triggers a new wave of pain. We tell them the truth, but not all of it. They don't need to know all the details. Not now. However, we must be open and honest with them about the situation. Ella sniffles and wipes at her eyes. I can't bear the thought of harming them. David, neither can I say, the weight of our responsibility bearing down on me. But they deserve to know that things will change, that we are going to live apart. Her breath catches and she looks at me, shocked. Do you want a divorce? I'm not sure what I want. I admit that the words are bitter in my mouth, but I also know that I cannot simply pretend that this never happened. We need space and time to figure out what happens next. She nods slowly, as if the realization has just dawned on her. I never wanted this, she admits, her voice trembling. I never wanted to destroy our family. I believe you, I say, and it is the truth. However, this does not change what has occurred. We should consider what is best for both the children and ourselves. The heavy rain begins to subside, giving way to a light drizzle. We sit silently, each lost in our own thoughts, until Ella finally stands. I quote, "I'll go see my mother," she says quietly. For now. It's probably best if I'm not at home. I nod, not trusting my ability to speak. The thought of returning to that house, with the memories that haunt its walls, is almost unbearable. But it's the kids' home, and they require stability. Something to hold on to during this storm. Ella pauses for a moment before leaning down and gently kissing my cheek. It was once a comforting gesture, but now it only makes me feel hollow. She walks away, her figure fading into the mist. I sit there for a long time after she's left. The bench was cold and uncomfortable beneath me. The park is now empty. The rain has driven everyone away. The world seems impossibly vast and empty, and I'm left alone to deal with the aftermath of a life I don't recognize. I eventually stand and walk back to the car. The drive home was a blur. The landscape outside the window is nothing more than a smear of colors. When I finally pull into the driveway, the house stands before me, dark and silent. I sit there for a moment, the engine still running, wondering how I'm supposed to continue from here. The life I've created is crumbling around me, and all I can do is watch the pieces fall away. But as I get out of the car, the rain has completely stopped. I realize I'm not just watching, I am living it. And I have to figure out how to pick up the pieces for myself and my children. I took a deep breath. Steeling myself for what's to come, I walk inside. The house is currently empty, but I know it won't be for long. The kids will be home soon, and I will need to be strong for them. I quote, have to find words to describe the inexplicable. But for now, I allow myself a brief moment of despair, leaning against the door and closing my eyes. The weight of everything falls on me, and I can feel the tears I've been holding back finally spill over. I heard the front door close behind me. The sound echoes throughout the house. One last note in the symphony of a life I no longer recognize. The days following the confrontation in the park drag on each, blending into the next. The house, which was once a sanctuary, now feels like a stage set for a tragedy. I pass through it in a daze. The room echoes with memories of a life that appears irretrievably lost. Ella is with her mother, and the children's absence has left a void that is both welcome and unbearable. I'm left to deal with the complexities of this new reality on my own. Conversations with Ella have been sparse and strained, with the majority of them centered on logistical details and childcare arrangements. Each interaction serves as a reminder of the growing distance between us. One evening, I sit alone at the kitchen table. The doorbell rang. I open it and find Roger standing there. His expression was more serious than usual. "David, we need to talk," Roger says, entering without waiting for an invitation. Julie is beside him. Her face was set in a worried frown. "Come in," I say, attempting to hide my unease. What happening? We sit at the kitchen table, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken tension. Roger doesn't waste any time. "David, I've been digging. I'm not sure if you are aware, but Ella has been seeing someone other than Mark." I look at him with a confused expression on my face. "What exactly are you talking about? It is not only Mark." Roger continues with a low voice. "After what happened, I looked into it, and it turns out Ella has been seeing someone else for quite some time, someone connected to her volunteer work." My heart beats. "Who?" Roger takes out his phone and shows me a series of text messages and photographs. The names and details are blurred, but one name stands out. Adam Whitmore is a popular local philanthropist known for his charm and influence. The messages describe an affair that has been going on for months, hidden beneath layers of deception. "No," I respond, shaking my head in disbelief. "This cannot be true. She would not." "David, I wish I was making it up." Roger interrupts. "But it is all there. Ella wasn't just unfaithful to you and Mark. She has been leading a double life." Julie reaches across the table and rests a comforting hand on mine. "We're here to help, David, but you should know the truth." I recline in my chair, the enormity of the revelation sinking in. My mind reels, unable to comprehend the gravity of Ella's betrayal. It wasn't simply a lapse in judgment or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated deception that lasted months, if not longer. "I need to speak to her," I say finally, my voice firm. I need to hear it from her own mouth. "Are you certain that's a good idea?" Roger inquires, his concern evident. "Given what we have discovered, it might be best to cut ties completely." "No," I insisted. "I am in need of closure. I need to know why she did it." The following day, I planned to meet Ella at a cafe. We used to go frequently. It's a place full of memories, and I hope that meeting there will bring some sense of familiarity in this sea of chaos. Ella arrives early. Her demeanor was as anxious as mine. "David," she speaks tentatively. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." I nod, taking a seat at the table and motioning for her to do the same. Let get straight to the point. "Ella, I know about Adam Whitmore. I know about everything." Her face pales and she looks around as if searching for an escape. "David, I can explain." "Explain what?" I cut her off. "How? You've been living a lie for months. How you've been deceiving me and our family. What could you possibly say that would make any of this wait?" She looks down, her hands clasped tightly together. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. It started with Mark, and then Adam came into the picture. I was trying to find something. Anything to make me feel alive again." "Alive?" I repeat, anger and hurt mingling in my voice. "You had a family, Ella. You had everything, but it wasn't enough." "I know," she says, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm very sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. It spiraled out of control. I got caught up in the excitement, in the attention. I didn't know how to stop." I shake my head, the anger building to a boiling point. "You should have come to me. We could have worked through it, but you chose deceit over honesty, betrayal over communication." "I was afraid," she admits, her voice breaking. "Afraid of what you would think, afraid of losing everything. But in the end, I've lost it all anyway." "Not yet," I say, my voice cold and final. "There's one more thing I need to know. Why, Adam? Why not just end it with me, if you wanted something else?" She hesitates, then whispers. "Adam offered me a way out. He promised me a new life, a fresh start. He was persuasive, and Enough." I interrupt the finality in my voice, cutting through her explanation. "I don't want to hear any more excuses. I want you to know that I'm done. I can't be with someone who's been so deceitful. Ella." S face crumples and she starts to cry. "David, please, no," I say firmly. "I have heard enough. I need to move on, and I want you to do the same." I stand up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Ella reaches out for my hand, but I pull away, feeling the sting of her touch like a betrayal in itself. I turn and exit the cafe, leaving her behind. Her sobs are echoing in my ears. As I drive home, the reality of our separation sinks in. The discovery of Ella's deception has dashed any remaining hope of reconciliation. The life we had is irreparably broken, and the future is uncertain and daunting. When I arrive at the house, it is late, and the sky is dark, dotted with stars that appear unconcerned about my plight. I step inside the empty house, a stark reminder of what I've lost. Our family's once lovely home now feels like a shell, a specter of what once was. The phone vibrates in my pocket, and I pull it out to find a message from Roger. We need to talk. Something else came up. I stare at the message, feeling a mix of dread and curiosity. What else might there be? What more could I discover about the tangled web of deception that has entwined my existence? I sigh and type back. Okay, let us meet. As I prepare to embark on another journey, I reflect on my previous experiences. The hurt, betrayal, and final confrontation. Everything has led up to this moment. The end of one chapter marks the start of another. One way I must get through the pain and start over. As the door closes behind me, I step into the night, prepared to face whatever comes next.